Good afternoon, everybody. So let's begin by chanting the lineage supplication. So we'll continue from where we left off this morning. The fourth thing in the list of 10 things to be abandoned is abandon the accomplishment of support by theft, robbery, or deception. So, what is being said here is that practitioners should not seek to support themselves or accumulate wealth by any crooked means, such as stealing through stealth, or overt robbery through force, or deception, speaking nicely to someone in order to manipulate them in some way. In brief, one should abandon a criminal lifestyle. The fifth one is abandon all activities that harm your mind or experience. And this means that one should give up any activity that either reduces your faith and devotion or in any way prevents you from practicing Dharma. By implication, this means that one should engage in those activities that are supportive of or conducive to one's practice. Such actions would include, for example, serving a temple or serving the community of practitioners. Such actions are both meritorious and conducive to the increase of one's faith and devotion. They are therefore helpful to one's practice, and one should do them. The sixth one is the corresponding antithesis of one we had in a previous list. Here it is, abandon food and activities that are harmful to your health. So this means that you should not eat or drink or do anything that makes you sick. For example, if you're allergic to the sun, don't go walking out in the sun. Is anyone really allergic to the sun?
I don't know. Just joking.
Really? I sometimes sneeze when I get in the sun. And behavior, to saying abandon behavior that is harmful to your health, means the kinds of things that I spoke of in the previous thing, behavior that is unhealthy and not conducive to virtue, such as the careless or excessive consumption of alcohol and other obvious things.
The
seventh thing to abandon is abandon fixated attachment born from greed for things you desire. The point is that it is a mistake for a Dharma person to spend all their time dreaming about becoming wealthy or famous. And also this includes being fettered by stinginess, such as when you possess means, but you're unwilling to part with them. You're incapable of making offerings, you're incapable of giving anything away in generosity to the needy because you're so stingy or miserly. That needs to be abandoned. The eighth one is abandon careless behavior that causes others to lose faith. And Rinpoche said, I think this primarily is directed at monastics.
다치 지단전나데 제 랍도 좀 와서 대전 당와 쳔바 선전 조던 수남사사 이신 람네지 되는 치기 난기 생기 냠도데 말한 상마 되는 통해단 자야가라 가보요래라 되는 제지 절람데 바페바 되는 좀바 다 참바 요즘 멤버진데 라신기 되는데 여바나 근데 지금 받아서 오 잡아 견딘바야 보도 되는 들라데네 군주줄라 되는 대바다 먹을게 들라데네 되는 그런 쪽이지 줄라 바자상도 샤도교래라 되는 대매바진에 된다바데 절람 밤에바 강정 먼저 지어들 때네 군주기 꿀텝제 되는 들라 잡아들라데네 되는 참선을 셔당게 맞아지 되는 랭엔사도교래.
Monastics are held to be a field for the accumulation of merit by others. This gives us the responsibility of behaving in such a way that we are fit representatives of the Buddha and his teachings. We are supposed to behave nobly, morally, gently, and honestly. When we behave this way, this naturally causes those who observe us to have more faith in and devotion for the Buddha's teachings. It therefore becomes a condition for their developing a very good habit, and therefore is beneficial. When monastics behave carelessly or badly, or rude or undisciplined, then it has the opposite effect. We become living, walking disgraces. We drag the name of the three jewels in the mud of our own problematic behavior.
다데인도 제다다 갑슬라 잡아대서 나양 은처럼 밥에 받아 처럼 야부 제고 그래서 제 잡아야 보지 제바나 메디테이션 최슈도 될 연구제도 연결해서 난 잡아 밤에 봐줘나 되는 세상에 다 잡아 상마된데 인사상 카당사당 되는 철을 린당 매버 근데 대범은 맞게보다 된데 연구해서 나제 된거죠.
Gampopa's point here is that people will judge the Dharma based on the behavior of its visible adherents. Therefore, monastics should behave in ways appropriate to monastics. If we do so, then naturally people will have not only faith in us, but faith in the teachings, will be more receptive to them. If we behave badly, then people will judge not just us, but the Dharma by the standard of our behavior. If they see one monk behaving badly, they will say, oh, they all must be like that, and lose faith in the Buddha and his teachings. Then the ninth one is abandon unnecessary or meaningless traveling and activity. If you need to go somewhere, do something, then by all means do it. But don't just act or travel out of restlessness. If it is beneficial to your training, hearing, reflection, or meditation, it is appropriate to travel even if you have to travel a great distance at great effort. For example, if it is appropriate for you to study with an eminent master who is some distance away, this is an excellent thing to do. But when there is no legitimate reason for a journey, you're simply going there because you want the distraction of travel, or you're restless. If the journey has no benefit for your hearing, contemplation, or meditation, if it does not contribute to your virtues of nobility, benevolence and wisdom, then it's just a waste of your life.
다지단기 딜라 그러스는 그래서 다 파서 망보 조대바이나 다 괜찮으면 되게래 괜찮으면 되게 한삼다 강할 잠을 되게래 다 된들 된데 내 잠을 사용하고래 되는데 상초를 좀 연초라 근데 제 중间저 갈전차에 망보 용교래 되는데 파서 만루 다제 냠내야 보제 다 조대 숨교래.
The main point here is that if you travel a great deal, then you're going to encounter all sorts of different situations and adversities. And your response to these may not be positive, it may be negative. So by traveling, you may cause yourself to accumulate unnecessary negative karma. And Gampopa is warning us against that. The 10th and last of the 10 things to abandon is abandon the concealment of one's own faults and the proclamation of the faults of others. Sometimes we are in great denial of our own faults, and when we are, we usually perceive others as not only having those faults that we possess, of which we are in denial, but as having even more than that. And then sometimes when we become aware of our own faults, we hide them and we try to distract others' attention from them by talking about the faults of others. He said this, she said that, he did this, she did that, and so forth. If you clearly see a problem that someone else has, and you feel that by telling them about it in an appropriate manner, you can help them resolve that problem, and your intention is sincerely the wish to help them, it is fine to tell them about it in an appropriate way. But it is not appropriate to tell someone about their supposed faults or to tell a third party about someone's supposed faults with negative intent, with a malevolent intention. By doing so, you accumulate karma of a lower rebirth for yourself, and you will anger and irritate others as well. Now, the reason why in writing this book, Lord Gampopa compiled it in the form of lists is so that it'd be easy for beginners to remember 10 things to abandon, 10 things to rely on, 10 things to look out for, and so on. And for much of it, it's lists of 10, but then toward the end of the book, the numbers start to vary. And essentially, all of these lists consist of Lord Gampopa's frank advice directed at beginners and especially practitioners of the future like ourselves, and based upon his own practical experience of either things we need to abandon or things we need to cultivate. And all of the things that he says to abandon have one thing in common. They're all causes of our own misery, ways we bring about our own misery. So essentially, we could summarize half of what he's saying as abandon all the things that make you miserable. And then the other half is the things we should take up or adopt. And these are all things that are conducive to both immediate and long-term happiness. So we could summarize that half of it as, and cultivate or collect or rely upon all those things that are conducive to true happiness. There was one, I remember in the book that we had, where the number was not the same as what he said, but I don't remember if it's this one. Do you still have that book? Is the first one in the next list, compassion is the root of benefiting others, do not abandon it? Or something like that? Yes? It's in there? Okay, good. Because Rinpoche says that one's missing from his... Yeah, he says it has to be correct because otherwise it doesn't make up 10, and this is another list of 10. This next list, the last one was the 10 things to abandon. These are 10 things never to abandon. So the first one is, as compassion is the root of helping others, never abandon it. This means that if you lack compassion, we won't even think about helping others, let alone actually doing anything. So therefore, compassion is the starting point, the very root of all the good we might do for others, so therefore we must never be without it. We need compassion for every purpose and all the time. Because we need compassion in order to be directly helpful to others in the immediate present. But we equally need compassion as our fundamental motivation for the pursuit of awakening. Because the only possible cause of Buddhahood is the motivation of a loving and compassionate bodhicitta that seeks awakening for the benefit of others. Therefore, compassion has to be present from the beginning, throughout the path, and all the way through to the end. The second one is, appearances are the light of your mind, so don't abandon them. Appearances refers to all the things we see and hear and smell and taste and feel. And normally we think of these as problematic because it is based on the stimulus of appearances that we give rise to attachment, aversion, and apathy.
다치 나와다 내가랑서 검잡려가 신했다고 검 매바다에다고 당 대참에서에 내 차시 땡기어 때 뒤에도 배상요 말에.
And so sometimes when people are meditating, particularly practicing tranquility meditation, they try to stop appearances. They think that appearances are a problem, are a distraction, so they hope that if they meditate deeply enough, appearances will simply disappear. But they can't do that.
가서 나왔음지 랑웨레스 나와 가져샤나 샘코랑기 造샘코랑기 다 윤덴스 나레데인디 가토베 칼라카보레.
But appearances can never stop because they are the natural light of the mind. The light of the mind, the display of the mind, the attribute or quality of the mind is the experience of appearances.
다치 니마당 외설니 가가지 오선나 제트베요 말에 근데 외설이 님이 윤는데 이미기 나와래 남나 랍주로 와다 단선배 자자만.
It's like if you tried to separate the sun and its light. You can't remove the light from the sun. The light is the sun's defining attribute.
다데인데 가랑서 검잡니 매버서다 동바 야르드데 용비요 용토비요 말에 근데 나왔음지 랑웨바 랑사리바 오시고 그래.
So meditation for us is not the attempt to cause phenomena to cease arising or to disappear from our experience. That can't happen.
같이 나와 남기 남도 됐네. 그래서 상마 망보 저여대 검잡도가라 빵나 빵도가 말에 다들레장 오시 그래서 심지랑 잘이 방 오시 내 심지랑 당이 방 오시 난 대가는 맞아 봐샤고 그러와.
Since we cannot abandon appearances, we need to recognize their nature, recognize that they are the mind's display or the mind's light.
또 디젤라양 다달레게도 남도 춘이지 롤바임베 매방서다 남도 잠면에 시작인데 춘이 고란기 롤바 다지 춘이데 야조나신지 야조레 발라망부 출연도 갈라 발랍데당 야조니 가가지요 말했더니 룽기 땡기 망부 다 가가져버지 통용만나 발랍랑 가서 사마 따기어라 따다나야 동자고 자운데 잠면에 좀라 따기어데 된디나신기 되네 지금 오늘지나 야조 발랍당 자존이 가가요 말에 근데 발랍 시도도 자조랑 해야 돼요 그래 근데 먼저 줄주가라 자조랑 줄겨래.
The third thing not to abandon is thought. Thought is the display of dharmata, so don't abandon it. The display of dharmata means that thought is the display or upsurge or expression of the mind's nature. Just as the waves on the surface of an ocean are made up of the same water as the rest of that ocean, we can conceptually distinguish between the waves and the ocean, but the waves do not exist separately from the ocean. And so, in the same way, waves are simply the surface of an ocean affected by the wind. We are afraid of waves, we worry about waves, and so on, but they are just part of the ocean. And when the wind stops and the waves subside, they subside back into the rest of the ocean. In the same way, thoughts are simply the display or upsurge of the mind itself.
자주 발랍이 시도도 자주 나라 템도교래 땡가라서 남도대 자보샤랑도 상행기 참sam라드네 야보쇼라시난다 저희 대방무규 다들란나 되기도 냠렌지도기 남도스나 되기도 네 정년발라도 자다모종이 남도스나 되기도 돼 근데 저 기대 깬당 전에네 남도도 초용교래 대한 남도대 시도도 주닝을 호랑 바시도교래 주닝을 템도교래.
Just as waves subside back into the ocean of which they are the expression, even the most intense thoughts simply return to the mind within which they arose. They could be positive thoughts, faith and devotion, or negative thoughts of attachment, aversion, and apathy. But in either case, they're simply the mind responding to a given stimulus, just as the ocean responds to the wind by producing waves.
다 된대요. 나랑서 남도라 셴바쇼네. 되네지 상엔 망보지 용대요래. 되네 남도대 준이지를 봐임 봐 하고 되네지도 나 준이지를 봐임 봐 하고 되네 셴바마쇼나. 되네 돌도고래. 셴바쇼나 돌도만데 제가 셴바쇼 나 타로 저고래.
The problem we have with thoughts is that we fixate on the content of thoughts, and we divide them into good and bad. And as long as we fixate on the contents of thoughts, then we are stuck on them, and thoughts will not be liberated. But if we do not fixate on them, if we simply let them be, they will be naturally liberated by themselves.
다된데 아니 제 나루파기 텔로파기 나루발이나 보나웨 메칭 심베칭 심베도시 나루파스 텔로파기다 나루팔라소나 나와 담메라샤르 딜라 테네가 중에 말해서 검자라 나와라 칭인의 간서 딜라 짐바쇼나 테네 칭도레스 코르왈 홍도레스 심바데 빵고레스.
Speaking of both the subject of this one and of the previous point, Tilopa advised Naropa, "Child, it is not by appearances that you are fettered, but by a fixation. Let go of fixation, Naropa. It is not by what we see or hear or even what we think that we are fettered. We are fettered by our fixation on appearances and thoughts."
다디조다 난갑서부터 시험도 때 다워던 보자고 내체 찾으신 분 냠래 여대바 된나네장 내체 라동기 냠래 낭용바 되네 그래서 배달라 보여래.
Now, from here on, in this list, it gets a little bit tricky because it's talking about a context in which a person has fairly a strong meditation practice, and in particular, the practice of the insight meditation of Mahamudra. And for somebody who has that experience, it will all make sense and not seem too difficult. But for beginners inexperienced in such practice, these may sound a little strange. For example, the third one here is, as kleshas are the illumination of wisdom, do not abandon them.
남도에서 상연라 때네 되는 용보다면 제교열에 된 용봉어 맛이 빨라 되는 데라 고르비 자와 또 차도교래 고르와 홍제 차도교래 된 용봉바디 인로당 내로된 워시나는 이제 차도교래 이나야 용봉바락바디 단지 대고 순거리게 빵고고요 저래디 엠보텐제인사 말에.
Now, what this means is that kleshas arise based upon thoughts. A thought arises, if we fixate on it, and then it becomes a klesha. But the klesha itself can also still be recognized. If the nature of the klesha is recognized, then the klesha becomes or is transformed into wisdom. If the nature of the klesha is not recognized, it becomes the basis of samsara. So what's being said here is that if you can recognize the nature of kleshas, you will discover wisdom. It is not saying that conventional coarse, overpowering kleshas are wisdom. There is no vehicle of Buddhism in which coarse kleshas are recommended. They are to be abandoned according to the teachings of any vehicle.
나랑 더버지 라네 제 양마나 되자라 상나리도 세상라 상나리도 다 세상도 공도 숙충보지 라나 겐지난 체온도 나 공도 숙충보지 라도 가나데 서로의 숙충보지 배트게 버데 근데 내가 없어라 남산 년부 때네 오 니처럼 공도 라이게 되네 공도대 가와도 여기 칠러도 여기 낭라도 여기 낭라요나 가와내기도 근데 나 코랑게 입단 남바데 간데도 공도 코랑나 다치 연이 여대바 거기 비자자연데 내 류에 남들 저쪽요래 마기 다 저쪽요래 내가 지금 샘에서 사바소베 자쪽요래 샘 시와단 로보 용교 말에 연이 여대바데 간데지도 따지다나 얘가 가 보여래.
To give you a very simple example of this, let's suppose that I become intensely angry. If I'm able to apply the remedy to that immediately, then I look directly at the anger. Now, anger, of course, is a strong feeling. We have strong, even physical sensations when we become angry. And based upon the strength of the mental and physical feeling of anger, we assume that it exists, since it seems to cause such intensity. But if you actually look at and for the anger, look to see, where is it? Is it inside your body or outside your body? If it's inside your body, exactly where is the anger? What characteristics does it possess? Does it have a shape? If it's in a certain part of your body, how much space does it occupy? What is the actual dimension of anger? Does it have a color? Is it made up of some material, and so on? Even though as we all know, anger feels so intense. We turn red, we may start shaking, we feel all kinds of metabolic changes in our body. When you actually look at and for anger, there's nothing there. So when you look for the anger while you're angry, you don't find it anywhere. And then if you watch how the anger dissipates, and anger always at some point dissipates, and you try to watch it dissipate and see what is happening. Does anger disappear the way a sound kind of slowly vanishes? Does it disappear like something disappearing from one's vision? Does it disappear like the lights being turned out? What exactly does it mean? You can't find it even when it's dissipating. You can make a distinction between being angry and not being angry, but in neither case is there a thing there. What happens is, one moment you're angry, and the next moment a different stimulus arises. You see one of your friends, or someone says something funny, or they say something nice to you, and all of a sudden, whereas you were angry the moment before, all of a sudden you're not angry at all. It doesn't go gradually because it was never there.
Dadila, energy, Yamoy, she is Saldabi in Bez, Dukala, Yamlayan, there's Setumbo Lemna, the Neji, Yamumba Kazuki on Nayan, Yeshel, La Jurtubetan, Yeshel compelled the trailer, the younger and Yumumbadi, then let Ambobola, then Yumumbadi, Yeshel Jurmato, Tarum Barche Mungo Yongore, come let Nemato. So
when Gampopa writes that kleshas reveal or are the illuminators of wisdom, he's talking about when someone's practice is highly advanced and every time a klesha arises, they immediately see its nature and it therefore reveals a wisdom. This is obviously not the case for beginners. For beginners, kleshas are obstacles. They prevent one's mind from coming to rest in meditation.
And the capsule that the Tawatumbo is also the Saman Nawa, down Chuni, down Wesel, the she on the test, Yamne Yala Karos, left of it. So, when Gampopa says kleshas are not to be abandoned, he's talking about a fairly high or advanced level of practice. And indeed, here he's talking, all of his language, as soon as Gampopa starts talking about appearances or the clear light or kleshas turning into wisdom and so on, you can assume that the context of that list is an advanced practitioner. Then the fourth one is as, you could say, sense pleasures are the manure of experience and realization. Do not abandon them. 단디인데 안에 rangi 윤된 나면도 세신부 사야다 그레포 그레다 강버제분한 데서 빵고레스 다 취제나 그래서 동자래서네 다지 취선의 셈기 제고래 내 셈기 녀모베 왕도 마솔 난셈 녀모베 왕도 얘마소나 그래서 이제 빵고 말해스.
Now, what is he saying here? We know that we are trying to get rid of kleshas. So we associate kleshas with their stimuli, which are sense experiences, pleasures. So we would imagine that fine, delicious food, fine or expensive clothing, and a luxurious house or dwelling would all be impediments for a practitioner, since they're apt to stimulate kleshas, and therefore we would assume that we need to abandon them. What Gampopa is pointing out here is that these things only become obstacles if we generate kleshas on the basis of them. It is the kleshas themselves that are the problem, not the quality of the food, clothing, or dwelling.
냠네 여바 라 시자진의 숨겨래 근데 되연라 근데 자신 예면로 당가랑저 가서나 강버세군나라 자신 지어래 세신불라 자신 지어래 세미신불라 메가게 자교래 그 레볼라 자신 지어래 연자적보다라 자신 지어래 근데 셴버 조선나 되게 말해스 다 대서 롱전이 자신 매봐 셴버 매봐 근데 중보에나 냠랜데 공벨도 그래스.
So Gampopa again here is talking about someone whose practice is developed enough that no matter how fine the food they eat, the clothes they wear, or the dwelling they live in may be, they have no attachment toward them. This is quite different from us. We can tell we have attachment because we have preferences. Someone without attachment will have no preferences. As long as you prefer good food to bad food, you are attached. As long as you prefer fine clothes to shoddy clothes, you are attached. And as long as you prefer a luxurious dwelling to a shoddy, ramshackle one, you are attached. What he is talking about here is somebody who, not being attached to these things, will not be harmed by simply experiencing them or enjoying them.
주진 세상 상도고요 말에 대부 양보 깨도고요 말에 동보 야고야 사도고요 말에 다든지 연줄라 저 땡고 그래스 다도예요.
In fact, for somebody who is truly without attachment and craving, they can use these experiences as manure. If we want to grow something, we not only need to plant the seed in fertile soil, but we need to mix manure with the soil to stimulate and nourish the growth of whatever it is. In the same way, an advanced practitioner can use these things to stimulate the growth or development of their practice.
냠는 제바당이야 도연 자천보라 롱전에 냠는 제발라 선생님 제발 주기 돼 샘데네 냠는 제발 주기 돼 된다고래 되네 가정 원해지나 내지 저봐야다 맨다다 지금 냠는 돈 버려도 생부던데 되네 미기 담면을 랍던데 저라 세당 맞아 공로 맞아봐 라신기 랍근 거라라 잠바다 닝제제 돼다 된데지네 냠는 공벨 돼라 된데기 자와다 맨다 된난교래.
Now, how are these things used as manure? Basically, an advanced practitioner can use different situations to test the stability and independence of their meditation practice. For example, they can compare their experience of meditating in the midst of a crowd of people and with meditating in a situation of total solitude. Compare the experience of meditating while staying in a luxurious dwelling with the experience of meditating while staying in a Spartan hovel. They can compare the experience of what happens in their mind when someone praises them with what happens when someone criticizes or speaks harshly to them. The fifth one is, as sickness and suffering are spiritual friends, do not abandon them.
다 르제 나자 섬지 동아 대절라 책신 따용 되가라 되네지 마랑전나다 제 될룰라 내 답고지 답선나에 양면 제게 섬들레게 말에 대저답 내 섬라 동아 답고지 랩선나야 되네 양면 젠투고 말에 되네 섬바 가서 동바데서 나고 되네 밀라야 가자 마세 랑 제고 되네 배 갈라가보다 전대게로 와
Physical sickness and mental distress or misery, for us, usually unseat us in our practice. When we become physically ill or mentally distressed, we do not remember our practice. We tend to curl up into a ball of depression and sit there or lie there with a gloomy countenance, unable or unwilling to even speak civilly to those around us.
다 공마도 저기 되는지 셈라 동안 된데 존나야 남상 오당아 취야 부족고도 미다봐 조골용도 삼단 제 배나 다부르 뭐지기 남다르서 제나 된다부르 뭐지라 칸도멜롱된 다 세미도 슬라동원 셈라 동안 레온데 다 맞춰야 고지 좀고도 맞춰라 다르 안 가서래 갈도비 취지 제고도 삼네되네 라마 기위신이 못된 근데 준줄 꿀마제 준줄 숙체로 당겨래 된다 오늘 지나 된대지고 그래서 나겨라 나서 동아주
Whereas our forebears in experiencing sickness would take it as an inspiration, as encouragement. For example, we see in Lord Gampopa's biography that once in his early 40s he was meditating and received a prophecy from the Dakinis that he only had 3 years to live. Instead of being discouraged, he became even more diligent in seeking out excellent spiritual friends and practicing with intensity. For them, sickness and misery are inspirations because they remind them of impermanence and remind them of the need to practice. And that is how we need to be. The sixth one is, enemies and obstructors are the exhortation of Dharmata, so do not abandon them.
That's what Jinjita, that's what Jinjita gave. Sinatra, that marked Javion, Nobala Sobatan, Takuma Chakbagi, and down that time and again, nobody party on Yore, and Barje. And the Chuniji Robare, how not Chuniji Loneta, Chuni Roba, but the contest and a Manjute Square.
Dela Kulma Segado, Dela Ropa Segere.
Kulman. The Kulma Sedugal, that's a Chunilo Kulione, Namaya Pachagure, Chuniji Samlo, the Comia Pachagur and the Tata Naza, Tungal Dachek, Tata Parchita Sama, the Lelabu on the Maranza take the Square Calabana, taken which is in Milag and the lawyer. Nejimela Namnjete Capsula, Saringmala, Sobakunamaki, then Tasimula, Sobataki Milala, then Parje Chegalere, and Parje Chegayonayam, and Milaki Tagursum Jedugala, Tamakoran Soyam, then a common Japan, Loma de Sojabore, then Chuniji, Neloto, Chuniji, and that Dentona, and the Chiyungu, Taki, and Chila Neva.
Enemies are those who wish to harm us, who are human beings like ourselves or animals, those with bodies, such as invading armies or criminals, thieves, robbers, and so on. Obstructors are spirits that don't have bodies, at least in our perception, that want to harm us. And although we fear these things tremendously, in fact, they really remind us of the need for dharmata. They remind us of the need to realize ultimate reality. This is hard to understand, but if you consider the biography of Jetsun Milarepa, when he was challenged by the Rakshasi of the rocks, or by Tseringma and her sisters, and so forth, in the end, he not only met their challenge through singing of his realization, but he actually enlisted their aid so that they became his disciples and protectors. To apply this to our own level as beginners, the problem we face is that when we experience the enmity or aggression of others, we have trouble even being patient, even being compassionate with them. So what we need to work on is to deal with these situations with patience and compassion. Then the next one is, if things arise spontaneously, they are siddhi, so do not abandon them. So the point here is, if something good comes to you without any effort or intention on your part, it happens spontaneously, you didn't seek to acquire it, you didn't seek to arrange it happening, then it is siddhi. But it's not siddhi if you engaged in some kind of effortful process or manipulation in order to acquire it. This really is directed at those who practice intensively, hermits. And for such people, even if they do not go out and fundraise, running around and engaged in some kind of self-advertisement, still people will, out of faith, bring them offerings and supplies and so forth. They should not refuse these offerings out of faith, because they didn't try to elicit them, and they simply arose out of the faith of others. And one should not take the attitude, well, I'm a pure practitioner, therefore I can't accept this offering. Effortful acquisition of resources, supplies, wealth, or possessions by a hermit is obviously corrupt. It involves attachment, desire, jealousy, competition, some form of aggression, and trickery. But if these things simply arrive at your door without any effort on your part, they are siddhi or blessing and should not be turned away. They should be enjoyed and accepted. The eighth one is, the path of means in any form is preparation for the path of wisdom. Therefore, do not abandon it. In any path, There is the necessity of both means or upaya and wisdom or prajna. And upaya are needed in order for authentic prajna to arise and be balanced. In the context of the sutras, this means that the arising of the sixth perfection, the perfection of wisdom, depends upon the existence of the first five, the five perfections of means: generosity, morality, patience, diligence, and meditation. In the context of Tantra, this means that the practice that emphasizes wisdom, Mahamudra, should be supported and facilitated by the practice that emphasizes means or upaya, which in our tradition refers specifically to the six dharmas of Naropa, which are all intended to prepare one for and lead one to a more profound experience and realization of Mahamudra. The ninth one is, do not abandon Dharma practices of which you are physically capable. So, for example, let's say somebody thinks, well, I have realized Mahamudra, therefore I'm no longer going to chant liturgical practices with my speech or do prostrations with my body. I don't need those things anymore. That's incorrect. Even if you have gained some experience or realization of Mahamudra, you should keep on doing prostrations with your body and chanting with your speech. You should do whatever you can. We even see this in beginners who will say, well, I want to practice meditation, pure and simple. I don't want to do any of that weird stuff like making offerings or kowtowing to statues or the feast practice or any of these things. I don't need any of that. I don't like that stuff. I just want pure, simple meditation. Gampopa's point here is, regardless of what meditation practice you are pursuing, you should supplement that with whatever you can do, physically and verbally. So, if you can make offerings, offer flowers or whatever it is, do it. If you can serve by cleaning the temple and accumulating merit thereby, do it. If you can do prostrations, then do them. Because regardless of the wisdom aspect, you still need to continue to accumulate merit. Then the last one, whether it's the 10th or 11th, I think it's the 11th of 10, do not abandon benevolent intentions, even if you have little power to enact them.
네버도 근데 용교래 근데 잡도 봐요나 근데 잡고래스 근데 뭐 중중이나야 신변지 삼바 닝제디 방해요 말레스 강토도기 전으로 보제고래스 시교래가
We always, or we often find reasons why we should not try to help others. Sometimes our concerns are fairly legitimate. For example, someone may be seriously ill and enervated or weakened by illness. Or someone may feel, well, I'm not a powerful person, I'm not an influential person, there's not much I can do to help others. There's no point. The point that Gampopa is making here is there is always something you can do. If you maintain the intention to help others, regardless of how limited your actual abilities may be, there will be at some point something you can do to help others, but only if you maintain the intention to do so.
다들 자랑라 펜탑 고급 좀 받아 펜탑 되주나 펜타고레스 남산 첨부다도 말이죠. 가리나 중중리야 따고레스 배나 추택 버사벌 때네 되네 통주당 자고레야 단다 가리나 칼라소야기 추는데 자도 그래서 너 강도 그래서 디나신기 자나신라 펜다야 되는데 중중리 점지 따나 첨부다도 그래서
So we have to take the attitude, if I can ever help someone, even in a tiny way, I will do it. Because by helping others in tiny ways, we gain the ability to help them in great ways. Just as you can fill a large pot big enough to cook a meal in if you let it be filled drop by drop.
난 테네 미방으로 저주이 넣어서 빵이 말했어.
다다 저알랑게나 가이나.
나스다 코란스 직진하러 저와이가 주선 직도긴 다들 코란스 좋아했으냐.
So we have about 20 minutes. Do you want Rinpoche to continue, or do you want to ask questions? I know, Amy, you had a question left over from the morning.
Okay, then we have got to a question.
Okay. So please go ahead with your questions. Please use the microphone.
Hello, Rinpoche. I'm really happy that you're here. Most of our practices dealt with visualization. For those of us who have obscurations with visualizing, could you give us some suggestions to help us through that?
So nyamlan mangcha mikpa gongcho yore. Ta kashe ke mikpa ka salnang yoya la kala kapo yores.
Tadi mikpa salnang yoya kala kapo di tangarang one da kirim sendiri tangan tumbajani. Tene part senden dende tambu chal. Tene te tunla sha, te la mangpo jal. Tene te mikchum. Tene parki ibdang kyoba chazang. semnang la charki do charki mi ta yang kawa ma san te la ya pota ta tende te mangpo cheba na tene ko ba la je ta wa shin do tene rang semnang la charki re la tende ya po cha so na namba sal wa de rangi to che phang ma do kom na re ne tyun ji nam ga la kom na re chen de so kom na re tene che wo so lo kom na re tene le la po cha yong yo re ti ma na de pe ma da wa re shin la de ga la tene sam lo ta ya mangpo do ji I
think the most effective way to quickly gain the ability to visualize clearly is to first of all acquire a good photograph of a good painting of the particular visualization. Yeah, has to be iconographically correct, the same as the text. It's not something that's imaginatively done in order to sell to tourists. And so you acquire such an image of whatever it is, the refuge tree or Vajrasattva or Chenrezig or whatever, and then you place it in front of you and you look at it until you you feel that it's sort of saturated you, and at that point you close your eyes and you try to recreate the image mentally. And you keep doing that with closed eyes until the image dissipates. Then you open your eyes, you again look at the painting, the photograph of the painting, until again it kind of saturates you. Then you close your eyes and you try to recreate it in your mind. And so on. And by alternating these two things, looking at the photograph and trying to recreate it imaginatively, you will actually get to the point where you have a strong image of the picture, whatever it is, without having to look at the photograph. And that seems to be the easiest way to do it. Otherwise, if you try to build it up step by step, just visualize a lotus and then the moon and then so on, it can be very cumbersome. But this way, you can do it. And once you get a clear image of what it is, then you can apply it to anything. For example, whether it's Chenrezig or Vajrayogini or Vajrasattva or the refuge tree, once the image is clear, you can visualize it in front of you, you can visualize it above your head, you can visualize yourself as it, and so on, as required by the specific practice. But don't imagine it. Of course, you're using a painting, a photograph of a painting. When you reproduce the image, don't imagine it as flat. And if you use a statue, don't imagine it as lifeless and made of metal or clay.
Thank you.
Unmoving, yeah.
So I had a couple things. Going back yesterday when you were talking about selling religion or selling Buddhism, I'm a psychologist, I work with children, and so Buddhism really, I really find it really works well together. But I've, in the schools you see other religions and how they, I don't even know if you want to call it a manipulation in the instruction, pairing the religion with it, but I feel that for me that really works together, but I don't want to be selling the religion or manipulating in that way. What suggestions?
But you don't want to sell it. Do you mean you don't want to proselytize, or you don't want to be teaching Dharma for money?
Proselytizing.
Proselytizing, yeah. I always is it proselytizing? I always say proselytize. It's proselytizing. You're right.
I think it's proselytizing.
Yeah. Derela. That kasong song chu song nyingi mare. Da deng song ge da ari ge satrim tone lobra nan the chu lojong zo chog mare ten inan konso yeshu pa konso de da tabla kep ya na tabla kep are do na yojure kan inan konso zogdo. De indu dene moronga samna moronga semji rek pare puku ge semji rek amchire. Dene puku sola nangpa ke Drempa dan Shishin dan de so bet ma se pengedo. Lamsong pengagares. Den so pugusala tets labna yapore songados. Yinang dene pena chu songyakam dene shenda la tets chu yojugo ne chula tria the nyingemares.
The Nakabs said the Rotom de Manga Samoti Laptogala, the Netsos of the Tama Samot, the late Ambola Pembe Chanchu Sam, Pemba Shin, the Rangasan Peja Mambore, the Nanjandene, the Zolamna Shibenji Samro, the Nechi, Parabutelat, Pembe Sam Tangore, the Nakabs de Shade, Parabula Sam, Pembe Samlomeba, Maran Capsaya, Marana Murjai, Parabula Pembe Chudoyo Mare, Marana Pen, Desambotayo Mare Sigura.
Well, there are two reasons why you're in no danger of that. The first is that the injunction of Gampopa was not to sell the profound instructions of the siddhas, which refers to extremely, not arcane, but advanced technical instructions that wouldn't come into this issue of what you would use for the immediate psychological benefit of children. The second thing is that the real injunction here is against teaching out of selfishness, teaching for selfish reasons. If motivated by true benevolence, by true caring for your clients or patients or students, you present things that are actually going to help them, like kindness and love and mindfulness or even bodhicitta, things like that. There's nothing wrong with that. That's not what's called selling the Dharma. For example, your intention is to help these kids. And that's an intention that, as Gampopa pointed out in a previous list, should not be abandoned. There are things you can tell them that come from Buddhism that will help them. And you can and should.
I had one other. So going to when you were talking about enemies or people who present themselves as opponents, I kind of visualize people like that, like Garudas. Like, how do you address that, or do you just not respond?
Did you say Garudas?
Yeah, like kind of like, or just very angry.
Oh.
Like they're kind of manifestations of that.
The chungi kunge yapo go mason ta danla the drawo de so la dushe kansha go with those. Morange samsam drawo de so chung de gonge yose. Chung drawo de. Jigsaw rong na yan do po mare. Drawo che.
Ta ngarang zu menga ta dangma zu na janju sempe labja zu na la. Dane che pame du she sha la pame du she sha kale ka bona trobo chongme du she sha ne. Kom na ya boro.
Well, the usual approach taught in Bodhisattva training is to, when you can, think of people who are aggressive with you as your parents. And if you can't manage that, then think of them as your friends.
Charanga kasa, charanga sula tsewa chesho suyu na, charangi pala tsewa chesho na, sangma digi rajin yin, dirang yin, sanna kamsana tikiro.
So basically, the easiest way to put this is you simply pick whoever you love most, and you imagine your enemy as that person, so that you transfer your feeling of love onto the enemy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rinpoche. My question is in regard to yesterday as well. When the teaching spoke about busyness, that's something I can identify with, although most often my busyness is out of the idea of helping. And I just wondered, I wanted to get some clarity on that.
That kasong ke kadena rengam do yin jaje do me pa ke jaje monpo de draw de ya jo ma jo de so monpo nyinga ma ne song song da morong ke da leka mong chawa de me la pe ya dong chola chapchi shya res de so yin de la tene de leka monpo da zang sing monpo da do ge
Da shimbengi shenla pe dang National Tribute, and the Sholoranga Pen, and the Tengores, the Yamlin in Samba Jabo, and then the Sanga singing all the Mr. Tulatan, the Choyo Mare, Rangla Mapen, Shella Mapen, the Yamlea Matu, Timajes, Labshigura, cutting.
Well, basically, what it's saying is if what's making you so busy is really helping others, then you should do it. What we should not do is if, for example, you're in an intensive practice situation like in retreat, you should not allow yourself to become distracted from meditation by unnecessary activities. But to be doing things that are really helpful to others is a whole different thing.
Thank you, Rinpoche. These teachings are so wonderful. I have a follow-up question about visualization. For instance, Vajrayogini, as you described in the empowerment, she's standing on one foot, one foot is up, one leg is up, and so forth. And I'm striving to make my visualizations more and more lifelike, And so then I'm thinking, well, she's actually dancing, right? So do I hold her in my mind kind of suspended in that position? Or does she dance and therefore move her limbs?
Right, yeah. Did I? The pa to Ketsabodo in Donna Mapamari. That pen a pamola pesha wayana. The Natsuke Lagom to Samala Dogere. Kasonke, the Gampopa, Kawan Kaso, Rang Pamogongo Tosos. Pamo deang, Gatap Nangado, Shab Yun Changba. Then ye, the Yambage Lala, ye combare. That then in Guneke, Kunda Nanjing, Yugo Mepa Magom somebody's. Then the Pamoda get la, Deda Gomna, then a garden on a Deda Gongere, Yana, then a do the Tapa, Shutang Chitla, Sugare.
다지단기 데 나라서 라금 되가라 네 군다 잡고나 제중 가져 대가랑 만나 섬로 타임에 봐 구자자에 봐 된데 멤버 라 첨보 거메요래 충중 거메요래 나서보 저저고 다디 공바야도래 근데 공바야 보이나 라 상상마다 당 주주바 된데 말에 상해 쇼에 여봐 라 이시 버래 네 배에 여버래 네 전장에 여버래 전장도 배 용교래 근데 상상가라 이 딱잠제.
Well, basically, the positions the deities are shown in, the way this is taught, are a sort of an indication of their activity. And it is taught that one should not make them like statues, where they are limited in size to the size of a statue that you are using as an example. So when you're training in visualization of deities, you practice making the image of the deity huge and very small and all sizes in between. You want to be able to change it and substitute it. In the same way, with regard to position, then we're taught that the deities can come and go. They're wisdom beings, so they can walk, they can sit down, they can stand up, they can, they can be invited and come in, they can dissolve into things. They're not static like statues. So in the case of Vajrayogini, her particular dance posture is merely an indication or a sample of her possible postures.
I see. And if I may, a related question about sound during your visualization. In many of the images of the lineage masters, they're holding texts and making teaching gestures. Mm-hmm. And I'm imagining them speaking the Dharma, and there's a kind of sound emanating from the visualization that they are making. Is that proper?
Dene hla gombe kapsa pena jipe lama tetso gombe doso konamba kashe ke chakpe zongne shogiware da konamba ke chu sungshin gomna ngone dra long long joma gomgo gdoe.
다티 다티 공부부 소소기 안가서래 남죄 단돈에 삼로다에래 네지 가시게다 달랑랑 공부해줘래 가시는데는 배 두딩에 생라 공부해줘래디 다식도 다 달랑랑 공부 랍도에 가라 그래.
It varies. It depends upon what they're doing. If you're visualizing them in meditation, then you can think of them as silent. If you visualize them teaching, then they would be speaking, teaching, and so on.
다지당 남진 셰듀 갑살라 타탐제 준이지 랑다 스나네 시교래 냐면 이담도 냐면은 아담제 다제 다르 다삼제 아예 랑신 다든데게 시소문 보여래.
Generally speaking, in visualization practice, we think of all sound as the sound of Dharmata, which, for example, means in the case of the visualization of a deity with an associated mantra, you think of all sound as the sound of that deity's mantra.
Okay. Thank you. Very helpful.
Thank you again. My question is there such thing as extreme mindfulness to the point where you take it so much to extreme that it can be almost harmful to you or to others, in the sense that you're sweating the small things when you're not supposed to?
The Drenpa ke dream look ke kolare, Drenpa dream rock by Europe.
다 견슈로 지나 템바테스 짐
Lassa,
되네야 제 남진 되네 연보지네 보러
lassa.
되네야 제 노트쇼서레 제레사레 섬 섭섭지네 다 템바테 짐 보러
Excessive mindfulness would be the mindfulness that's accompanied by anxiety. The mindfulness that's based on fear. Oh, I'm going to make a mistake or something bad is going to happen. That's what we would call excessively tight mindfulness. So you want to adjust the intensity of it.
다 제신에 잡고 건바이나 되네 라도 검자는데 짐려 좀 바로 강샤고로 그냥 제 남도 숙천보 잡아 깨오나 내때서 르 되네 제 진화담 우버된데요나 돼서 짐다 돼서 아마 짐박이 제거로
In the practice of tranquility, we actually adjust our mindfulness depending upon what's happening. For example, if thoughts have become very intense, then we try to relax. But on the other hand, if our minds become torpid, then we intensify.
되네 제답 잡아던데 갑라 되네 전세 봐요 되네 나야 삼삼나 되네 녀몽밖에 쇼 이 상황도 쇼천보 주는 나 하고 있는데 된데스 템바테스 짐당 섭섭지네
In post-meditation, we try to maintain mindfulness that is neither too loose nor too tight. But under certain circumstances, such as when a specific klesha arises intensively, then we may need to exert more force in the mindfulness. So this will be the last one, Heather.
Thank you. Okay, I have a question regarding, it kind of goes off, spins off of her comment about getting angry or kleshas. And since I've been here, which is about 8 or 9 months, I found that as I worked, cleaning the shrine room, mopping the floor, even scrubbing the stairs, I somehow, for whatever reason, I got more out of that than I did actually sitting, like in the shrine room, getting a teaching, because I really didn't understand Buddhism that way. But just the mere act of cleaning and knowing that I'm cleaning for the Karmapa, and this is his heart, it kind of meant more to me. This was when I first arrived here. I later found out that it is a practice. When you're working in the shrine, it's a meditative practice, so I made a joke about it and said, I'm doing the Zen of mopping, But what I want to say is how, now that I started Nandro, and I hurt my foot, and I'm running into all of these obstacles. I don't want to call them kleshas, I want to call them obstacles. I'm having a hard time, it seems like I want to start over, you know what I mean, and start again. I go through this every couple of weeks, like, I should just start all over because something else arises. Is this normal?
When you're talking about starting over, do you mean...
Starting Nandro over.
You mean for starting from no numbers?
Yeah.
Dere, ko ina dawaje go tsam ngan la le dene dampo lakang tsama zo kenge leka topsong. De tsane ang kale de ngatso tsama ke desa ke kangpa tsama zo kenge leka topsongs. Dampo de lakang nan de dene chu shuwa le de lakang tang de zo tsama zo e kaso de semla pempa chewa jongsons. Jutsen de chula sapares, chushera hakoyo mare, de ne kache de zamong chewa gomato pares. Da niecha ne ngondro gotsu pare, ngondro gotsu ne de ne kangina bache alefson dampo kangpa cha dene yang de dao ke yang go tsut na yang de yang ba che che le dene data yang pa che shini go tsut go sare sang dos kandare do
tad de jidangi ngaranso duja ombo kamda mebas menda wende ana kashe zula kan zama je bala dene che semde lele dene semde shembala yang mando lega korang la go yang ne dene che semde han kibu cha dene yongyo dele dene che zula kan ge chinlab da lama nam je chinlab dene semde pa pe pa yongyo de ya bore.
People vary. We have different faculties, different makeups, different dispositions. And for some people, it actually is more helpful to their mind to do something like cleaning the temple, cleaning the shrine room. They find that their minds come to rest on the work, and they feel very happy doing it, which we usually take as a sign that they're receiving the blessings of the gurus who've consecrated the particular shrine.
Tatsamachini Tupatope Chitang Lurju Yore, Tana to Lurju Shutena to Zoro, Tene, Nibati, Dachi, Mundu, Kedu Kala Chasa Dunare, Karina Tenshi Payotes, Tene, Chasabana, Tenechi Tabetang, Tenechi Rie Lainare, Tesotes, Kyung Mare Samdo, Tene, Samsam Kaleka, Tenshi Pamechi, Tene Sena, Tene Paril, Suril, Tene Kambacha, Labacha, and the Yungre.
So there are many accounts of people actually gaining siddhi through cleaning, but we don't have time for me to tell you those stories. As far as the ngondro thing is concerned, when you're doing prostrations, be mindful and alert, and you won't have so many accidents. Usually, when people hurt themselves while doing prostrations, it's because they're fatigued and becoming a little careless in the physical execution of it. And that's when we find ourselves falling down in different ways and breaking our legs and whatnot.
Okay, thank you.
Dambo ngoa inam dambo korang de
Koransore.
the korang de jap de ken korang de ge zo da wore le ji ba ka zo wore ko
Namjum Chashikandore.
ta chepa mendo.
Last and then watching it.
So we'll dedicate the merit and then
Rinpoche, your kind presence and wise teachings here have been felt by all of us as an immense blessing. It's particularly meaningful because of the firm friendship of many, many years duration between Trungpa Rinpoche and our abbot, Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche. On the eve of what may be a great storm, you have left us with rainbows in our hearts. So on behalf of Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche and President Tenzin Choni and our whole KTD family, we'd like to make an aspiration that you return again to teach us many, many times. And we would also like to make this offering, humble offering of gratitude on behalf of the entire Sangha.
내지 가지고 봐줘 된다지 시 그거 내지 갈바 상부 도바대야 자랑 남지 내지 도저와 준비 보니 나는 또 조준 땅 개땅 제불 때문에 정보래 님 자랑 남지 도스 배걸 마시바나 나들 레도 말에 딜라 말레바나 난 안아서 된다 추억이 들어와대 용도고요 말에.
Well, I want to thank you because I only had this excellent opportunity to spend this few days with you here at the seat of His Holiness the Joan Karmapa, sharing this teaching by Gampopa with you because you invited me. Without your kind invitation, I wouldn't have come and we wouldn't have had this opportunity. So, what do you say, back to you? Back at you, that's it. Yeah. As for my coming back, I have no control over this. This is up to Kenshin Trungpa Rinpoche. So if you contact Trungpa Rinpoche and he decides I should come here, I will come here. And but it's not up to me. It's entirely up to him. My job description is doing what Trungpa Rinpoche tells me. If Trungpa Rinpoche says go east, I go east. If he says go west, I go west. So if he becomes aware that it's beneficial for me to come here, then he will send me here and I'll be able to come back. So it is also my job to try to serve you, and I hope I have done so. I don't know how much service I've been, but I hope to have been of some. I'm not a very good babysitter. Really, mothers make the best babysitters because they're the baby experts. Especially of their own children. Because I think it sounds like, I have to explain because otherwise I think they got it a little wrong. Babysitter, he doesn't mean that you're babies. What he means is that a mother knows her own children better than any babysitter. So he's sort of like, he means like he's like a substitute teacher. Yeah. That's what he's implying, yes. So, thank you.